Takeda Pharmaceutical. In 2015, Takeda Pharmaceutical agreed to a $2.4 billion settlement to resolve about 8,000 lawsuits in the U.S. involving its diabetes drug Actos. Patients who developed bladder cancer after long-term use of Actos claimed that Takeda failed to properly warn about the risk. The lawsuits alleged Takeda ignored evidence linking Actos to bladder cancer. Studies and adverse event reports had shown an increased cancer risk, especially for patients who took the drug for more than a year. Plaintiffs argued that Takeda had known about these dangers from early trials or market data, but delayed informing regulators and the public. In 2011, France and Germany pulled Actos from the market, and the US FDA later required a warning label update. Takeda was also sanctioned during litigation for allegedly deleting documents related to the drug's safety. The $2.4 billion fund provided average payouts of about $275,000 per plaintiff. Takeda admitted no wrongdoing, but chose to settle after facing a $9 billion jury verdict in an earlier trial. The case reinforced the importance of post-market surveillance and timely safety disclosures. DePuy. In 2013, DePuy Orthopedics, a unit of Johnson & Johnson, agreed to a $2.5 billion settlement to resolve about 8,000 lawsuits over its ASR metal-on-metal hip implants. These devices, recalled in 2010, failed at unusually high rates, often requiring patients to undergo painful revision surgeries. The lawsuits claimed that DePuy's ASR-XL acetabular and hip resurfacing systems were defectively designed. The metal parts rubbed together during movement, shedding tiny metal particles into surrounding tissue. This caused inflammation, tissue damage, and metal poisoning from elevated cobalt and chromium in the blood. Studies, including from the UK's National Joint Registry, showed a high failure rate within 5 years. Internal DePuy documents revealed that engineers had raised safety concerns, but the product was not recalled until problems became widespread. The settlement paid $250,000 to each patient who had revision surgery, with added compensation for complications. J&J set aside another $500 million for future claims and legal costs. Though it admitted no wrongdoing, DePuy reformed quality control, and the case led to tighter FDA oversight of hip implants. Johnson & Johnson. In 2013, Johnson & Johnson and its Johnson Pharmaceuticals unit agreed to a $2.2 billion settlement with the U.S. government over the marketing of Risperdal and other drugs. The deal resolved both criminal and civil charges involving off-label promotion, kickbacks, and false claims to federal health programs. The Justice Department charged J&J with promoting Risperdal for off-label uses, meaning they marketed the drug for conditions or patient groups not approved by the FDA. In this case, Risperdal was pushed for elderly dementia patients and children, even though those uses were not authorized and carried serious health risks. For example, in older adults, the drug was linked to strokes and deaths. J&J also allegedly paid kickbacks to doctors and to Omnicare, a large nursing home pharmacy, to increase Risperdal sales. The settlement included a $485 million criminal fine and $1.72 billion in civil penalties. Johnson pleaded guilty to misbranding Risperdal for dementia-related use from 1999 to 2005. J&J signed a corporate integrity agreement to change its marketing conduct. GlaxoSmithKline, GSK. In 2012, GSK paid $3 billion to resolve criminal and civil charges brought by the U.S. Department of Justice. The case involved illegal drug marketing, failure to report safety data, and payment of kickbacks. It became one of the largest healthcare fraud settlements in U.S. history and targeted GSK's practices around several drugs, including Paxil, Wellbutrin, and Avandia. GSK was accused of promoting drugs for unapproved uses, such as marketing Paxil to children, and Wellbutrin for weight loss and sexual dysfunction. Both uses were not authorized by the FDA. The company also withheld safety data about Avandia, a diabetes drug linked to increased heart risks. In addition, GSK allegedly offered doctors cash, trips, and speaking fees to encourage prescriptions and made false claims about drug benefits. The $3 billion settlement included a $1 billion criminal fine and $2 billion in civil penalties. GSK entered a corporate integrity agreement, changed its compensation system, and ended payments to doctors for promotional talks. No executives were jailed, but multiple employees were disciplined. American Home Products, AHP. In 2000, AHP agreed to a $3.75 billion class action settlement over its weight loss drug combination Fen-Phen. The combo, popular in the 1990s, paired fenfluramine with phentermine. After reports of heart valve damage and a deadly lung disease called primary pulmonary hypertension, fenfluramine was withdrawn from the market in 1997. Lawsuits claimed that AHP failed to properly test the drug and ignored warnings of heart-related side effects. The drug was found to cause thickening and malfunction of heart valves when combined with phentermine. Plaintiffs argued that AHP rushed the product to market without sufficient long-term safety data and reacted too slowly to mounting evidence of harm. The $3.75 billion settlement created a trust fund to compensate injured users and fund future medical monitoring. Payouts varied by injury severity, with some reaching $1.5 million. The number of claimants far exceeded expectations, and by 2012, total payouts had risen to about $21 billion. Merck and Company. In 2007, Merck agreed to pay $4.85 billion to settle about 27,000 lawsuits involving Vioxx, a prescription painkiller used to treat arthritis. The drug, approved in 1999, was pulled from the market in 2004 after a clinical trial showed it significantly increased the risk of heart attacks and strokes in long-term users. Plaintiffs alleged Merck failed to warn about these cardiovascular dangers and, in some cases, intentionally downplayed them. Internal documents revealed that Merck executives had early data in the late 1990s suggesting Vioxx posed heart risks, but continued to market it aggressively. The approved trial in 2004 confirmed those risks and was halted early, triggering massive litigation. The settlement was designed to compensate Vioxx users or their families for cardiac injuries or deaths. Merck did not admit wrongdoing. The company's decision to fight initial cases one by one helped pressure both sides toward settlement. The scandal led to changes in Merck's leadership and stricter FDA regulations on drug safety monitoring and post-market surveillance. Purdue Pharma. In 2020, Purdue Pharma agreed to an $8.34 billion settlement with the U.S. Department of Justice to resolve civil and criminal charges related to its role in the opioid crisis. The deal included a guilty plea to 3 felony counts, $5.5 billion in criminal fines and forfeitures, and $2.8 billion in civil payments, making it the largest federal settlement ever with a pharmaceutical company at the time. Federal investigators found that Purdue aggressively promoted OxyContin for uses beyond its approved label, while downplaying the drug's addictiveness. The company was accused of targeting high-prescribing doctors, encouraging unsafe use, and paying illegal kickbacks to boost sales. Purdue was also charged with failing to stop suspicious pharmacy orders that led to the diversion of opioids for non-medical use. Purdue filed for bankruptcy in 2019, and the settlement was structured around that process. A new public benefit trust would run Purdue, directing future profits to addiction treatment and prevention. The Sackler family, Purdue's owners, agreed separately to pay up to $6 billion from personal funds. Johnson & Johnson. In 2023, Johnson & Johnson proposed an $8.9 billion settlement to resolve about 38,000 lawsuits claiming its talc-based baby powder caused cancer. Most plaintiffs were women with ovarian cancer or individuals with mesothelioma, alleging that J&J's talcum powder was contaminated with asbestos, a known cancer-causing substance. J&J had removed its talc powder from U.S. and Canadian shelves by 2020, replacing it with a cornstarch version. The lawsuits claimed J&J knew for decades that asbestos could be present in talc due to how it's mined and failed to warn users. Court-released documents showed internal discussions about asbestos findings and attempts to shape research and regulation. Although J&J maintained its products were asbestos-free, it lost several high-profile jury cases, including a $4.7 billion award in 2018 to 22 women, later reduced on appeal. To manage the claims, J&J created a new subsidiary, LTL Management, and placed it into bankruptcy, offering $8.9 billion over 25 years to fund a settlement trust. The plan's approval remains pending in court. Bayer. In 2020, Bayer agreed to pay $10.5 billion to settle about 100,000 lawsuits tied to Roundup, a weed killer made by Monsanto, which Bayer had acquired in 2018. Plaintiffs, mostly farmers and gardeners, claimed Roundup's key ingredient, glyphosate, caused non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a form of cancer. The lawsuits argued that Monsanto failed to warn users about cancer risks and allegedly influenced research to downplay dangers. A 2015 report by a World Health Organization agency labeled glyphosate a probable carcinogen, which strengthened plaintiffs' claims. Though Bayer denied wrongdoing and cited regulatory support for glyphosate's safety, repeated jury losses raised pressure to settle. The deal resolved most existing claims and set aside $1.25 billion for future cases. Bayer did not admit fault and was not required to label Roundup as cancer-causing. It continued selling the product but later announced plans to remove glyphosate from residential versions by 2023. The case triggered global debates about herbicide safety and regulatory oversight. Johnson & Johnson and Distributors. In 2021, Johnson & Johnson and 3 major drug distributors, McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal Health, agreed to a combined $26 billion settlement over their role in the U.S. opioid crisis. Johnson & Johnson, which made fentanyl patches and supplied opioid ingredients, paid up to $5 billion. The distributors responsible for delivering drugs to pharmacies paid up to $21 billion. The companies were accused of fueling opioid abuse by ignoring warning signs. Johnson & Johnson allegedly marketed opioids as low risk and promoted them aggressively to doctors. The distributors were said to have failed to stop suspicious, high-volume shipments to pharmacies, enabling misuse and overdose deaths. Settlement funds are designated for addiction treatment, prevention programs, and related services. The companies also agreed to reforms. Distributors must set up an independent system to monitor and block suspicious drug orders. Johnson & Johnson must stop selling opioids and avoid lobbying on opioid issues. None admitted wrongdoing, but the deal imposed strict oversight and triggered industry-wide changes.